Haley Morgan was the kind of person everyone liked, quiet, kind, and careful, but none of that mattered the day she crossed paths with Damon Keller, a handyman with a dark past and darker intentions. When she vanished without a trace, her small town was left grasping for answers. No one suspected that behind Damon's calm smile was a secret buried deeper than anyone could imagine. He thought no one would find her. He was wrong. In the quiet town of Rockwood Falls, nestled between wooded hills and winding roads, 27-year-old Haley Morgan lived a simple, peaceful life. She worked as a veterinary assistant at the Maple Grove Animal Clinic, where she was known for her soft voice and gentle hands. Animals trusted her instantly, and so did people. She had no enemies, no drama, no known history of trouble. Her world revolved around her job, her close circle of friends, and her younger sister Emily, whom she spoke to every night without fail. That's why, when Haley didn't respond to Emily's usual evening text on Thursday, it set off the first quiet ripple of worry. That Thursday had been uneventful by all accounts. It was raining lightly, and Haley had finished her shift at 5 p.m. sharp. A co-worker saw her leave the clinic wearing her usual navy blue hoodie, holding a small umbrella in one hand and her phone in the other. She crossed the parking lot, got into her car, and drove off in the direction of her apartment, just 5 minutes away. Everything appeared normal until it wasn't. The next day, Haley didn't show up for work. Her boss called her phone, then tried reaching her emergency contact. When no one could reach her, Emily decided to check the apartment herself. What she found only deepened the mystery. Haley's car was parked outside her building, right in its usual spot. The keys were still in the ignition. Her purse sat on the passenger seat, untouched. Her apartment door was unlocked, something she never did, not even in a town as safe as Rockwood Falls. Inside, everything looked in place at first glance. Her shoes were neatly lined up by the door, her bag was on the table, and the TV remote rested where she always left it. But the silence inside the apartment was eerie, almost too perfect. Then Emily noticed the bathroom mirror. It was cracked right down the center, as if someone had struck it with force. A faint, almost invisible smear of blood traced the edge of the door frame. It wasn't enough to be dramatic, but it was enough to send a chill down Emily's spine. She called the police immediately. The police began treating Haley's case as a missing person investigation. Officers spoke to neighbors, co-workers, and local businesses. Security footage from the apartment complex showed Haley walking into her building but never leaving. Her phone was never turned on again. Her bank accounts remained untouched. There was no sign of a struggle, no forced entry, no ransom note, and no obvious suspect. Her friends described her as cautious and private. She didn't go out much, rarely dated, and never invited strangers into her home. Investigators found no evidence of mental health issues or signs that she had planned to run away. As the days turned into a week, flyers with Haley's face began to appear across town. Vigils were held, and volunteers combed nearby woods and trails. But there were no answers, only questions. And behind every one of them was a growing fear: someone had taken Haley, and they had done it without leaving a trace. As the investigation into Haley Morgan's disappearance dragged into its second week, Rockwood Falls began to shift from quiet concern to uneasy fear. Everyone knew Haley, or at least recognized her from the vet clinic or the coffee shop she visited each morning. Her face now stared back from every telephone pole and shop window, eyes bright, smile soft, captioned with one haunting word: missing. Police set up a dedicated tip line, but leads were few and scattered. Most calls were from concerned citizens with vague sightings that led nowhere. It felt like Haley had vanished into thin air. Detectives decided to dig deeper into Haley's personal life. They pulled her phone records, bank activity, and online accounts. Her search history was mostly innocent: recipes, vet supplies, streaming sites, until they noticed some recent searches that stood out. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Haley had Googled how to tell if you're being followed, how to sweep a car for tracking devices, and best hidden cameras for home security. It was subtle, but enough to suggest she felt unsafe. She hadn't told anyone, not even her sister, but something had clearly changed. Buried in her call logs was a recurring name investigators didn't recognize: Damon Keller. He had called her 6 times in the 2 weeks before she went missing, and she had returned the calls each time. When police ran his name, they found he was a self-employed handyman, often hired through local Facebook groups and recommendation apps. He had no serious criminal record, just a traffic violation years ago, but he did have a connection to Haley. Records confirmed he had done repair work at her apartment building 3 weeks earlier. Detectives brought Damon in for questioning. He was calm, cooperative, and polite. He said he remembered Haley but insisted their interaction was brief and professional. He claimed he had fixed a leaky pipe under her kitchen sink and nothing more. When asked why he had called her multiple times, he explained it was to confirm the appointment and follow up on payment. It all sounded reasonable, and with no hard evidence, the police couldn't detain him. But they weren't convinced. Something about his demeanor felt rehearsed. Then a neighbor came forward with a memory that changed everything. She recalled seeing Damon return to Haley's apartment several times after the initial visit, sometimes in the evening. One time, she noticed him standing just outside Haley's door, even though she wasn't home. It struck her as strange, but she had thought nothing of it, until now investigators revisited nearby surveillance cameras. A gas station just a block from Haley's apartment had footage showing her and Damon together 2 days before she vanished. The video captured a brief but tense moment. Haley appeared upset, her hands gesturing sharply. Damon stood still, watching her with an unreadable expression. There was no audio, no clear context, but it was enough to raise red flags. Still, the trail remained frustratingly cold. There was no body, no crime scene, no undeniable proof of wrongdoing. Damon Keller slipped back into his quiet life, and the town returned to waiting. But behind closed doors, detectives were building a case. All they needed was one break, one overlooked clue to lead them to the truth about what happened to Haley. Morgan, winter passed in Rockwood Falls with no answers. Snow blanketed the woods where search teams had once walked, and the flyers bearing Haley Morgan's face began to fade and peel from telephone poles. The town returned to its routines. But a quiet unease lingered. Though no one said it aloud, most feared the worst. Still, without a body or a confession, Haley's case remained in limbo. That changed one warm day in early spring, when a man hiking through Rockwood State Park took a path slightly off the beaten trail. His dog had veered toward a cluster of brush and refused to move. When the man approached to investigate, he was hit by a putrid odor that stopped him cold. Buried under leaves and branches, he noticed the outline of something unnatural. Authorities arrived quickly. The site, about 7 miles from Haley's apartment, was marked by a shallow grave. Forensic teams carefully uncovered the remains of a woman. Her clothes were tattered, her body partially decomposed, and the grave had been covered in a way that suggested haste, not care. An old tarp had been thrown over the body, now shredded by time and animals. The woman's hands were bound, and her skull showed evidence of blunt force trauma. Dental records confirmed what everyone feared: the remains belonged to Haley Morgan. The crime scene offered few clues, but one item stood out. In the pocket of Haley's jacket was a folded and water-damaged receipt from a hardware store in town. The date on the receipt matched the day she had vanished. The items purchased were chilling: duct tape, rope, gloves, and a plastic top. Detectives visited the store immediately and reviewed the security footage from that day. The footage clearly showed Damon Keller at the counter, paying in cash for the exact items listed. Damon was brought in for a second round of questioning. This time, his story was thinner. He admitted to knowing Haley better than he had let on, saying they had gone on a few casual dates that didn't go anywhere. He couldn't explain the hardware store purchases. He claimed it was for a job, but couldn't name the client. When pressed, he became quiet and vague, avoiding specifics. Police obtained a warrant to search Damon's home and property. Behind his workshop, in an area partially paved with concrete, cadaver dogs signaled possible human remains. The area was carefully excavated, and what was found stunned investigators. Beneath the concrete were bones, later identified as belonging to two other women. Both had been reported missing in the past 5 years. Neither had known connection to Haley. Morgan. Damon Keller, who had seemed like just another quiet tradesman in a sleepy town, was no longer just a suspect in a missing person case. With Haley's body found and new evidence emerging, it was clear they had uncovered the work of a calculated and long-hidden predator. He had buried her where he thought no one would ever find her. But he had been wrong. The discovery of Haley Morgan's body was just the beginning. As forensic teams continued to examine Damon Keller's property, what they found painted a far darker picture than anyone had imagined. Beneath the concrete floor of his workshop, two sets of remains were carefully unearthed. Both were female. Both had been buried with the same eerie method, wrapped in plastic sheeting, secured with the same type of duct tape, and left in shallow depressions before being sealed under layers of cement. Investigators now understood that Haley was not his first victim. She was the one who finally led them to the others. The remains were identified through dental records and DNA analysis. One belonged to Rachel DeWitt, a 34-year-old woman who had gone missing from a neighboring town 3 years earlier. The other was identified as Alina Reyes, a 29-year-old who vanished after moving to Rockwood Falls briefly for work. Both cases had gone cold quickly. There had been no known connections between the two women and no evidence tying either to Damon until now. What shocked investigators most was the way he had hidden them neatly, methodically, in the place he worked every day, walking above their graves as if nothing had happened. Damon's home was searched from top to bottom. In a locked cabinet behind his bedroom wall, police found a box containing disturbing trophies, pieces of jewelry, hair ties, and even scraps of clothing, all belonging to his victims. Carefully labeled Ziploc bags held items linked to each woman. This quiet, soft-spoken man who had fixed leaky pipes and installed ceiling fans in the community had been collecting mementos from the lives he ended. Detectives also retrieved notebooks filled with disjointed notes and strange entries. Some pages contained descriptions of his movements, surveillance observations, and personal notes about his targets. While not direct confessions, they outlined a pattern. He had stalked each victim, learned their habits, and found ways to insert himself into their routines without suspicion. Most notably, the entries suggested that Damon had been watching Haley for weeks before he ever entered her home. He wrote about seeing her walk her dog, her route to work, and even noted when she usually returned home alone. He had planned everything with disturbing precision. The town of Rockwood Falls, still mourning Haley, was now reeling from the revelation that they had unknowingly lived among a serial killer. Damon had maintained a reputation as quiet but helpful. He often did work for elderly residents, repaired community center fixtures, and was active in online local forums offering free advice on home repairs. There had never been any outburst, any slip, or any hint of violence. As news spread, families from nearby towns began coming forward, wondering if Damon could be linked to other disappearances. Law enforcement launched a multi-agency investigation, revisiting unsolved cases with similar patterns. Meanwhile, Damon remained silent. No confession, no apology. He watched from behind bars as his secret world unraveled. He had built it in silence, believing no one would ever uncover what lay beneath the surface. But now, the truth had started to rise, and it wasn't going back underground. The courtroom was packed as Damon Keller's trial began, drawing reporters, grieving families, and curious townspeople who still couldn't reconcile the quiet handyman with the monstrous crimes he was accused of. The prosecution laid out the case methodically, starting with Haley Morgan's disappearance and leading into the horrifying discoveries that followed. Piece by piece, they reconstructed a pattern of premeditation and brutality. The jury heard how Damon had purchased materials used in multiple killings: ropes, tarps, duct tape, all from different stores, each time paying in cash to avoid detection. Surveillance footage, forensic evidence, and digital data painted a damning portrait of a man who had lived a double life for years. The most chilling part of the trial was not what Damon said, but what he didn't. Throughout the proceedings, he sat motionless, expression blank, eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge the photographs of the victims or the emotional testimony from family members. When prosecutors displayed the contents of the box found in his home, Haley's bracelet, Rachel's necklace, Alina's scarf, the room fell into stunned silence. Each item told a story of a life interrupted, a future stolen, a family left shattered. One of the most powerful moments came when Emily Morgan, Haley's younger sister, took the stand. Her voice trembled but did not break as she described the night Haley vanished, the agonizing days that followed, and the horror of learning her sister's fate. She spoke of Haley's kindness, her love for animals, and the subtle signs she had missed, the growing fear in Haley's voice during their last conversations, the way she had started locking her doors during the day, how she never said why. Emily's testimony was a reminder that this was not just a case about evidence and timelines. It was about lives forever altered by someone else's calculated choices. The defense had little to work with. They suggested that Damon's mental health might have played a role, hinting at possible dissociative behavior, but no expert could fully support the claim. The evidence was too strong, the pattern too clear. Damon had not acted in a frenzy. He had stalked his victims, learned their routines, gained their trust, and then silenced them. There was no sign of remorse, confusion, or regret, only silence. After a month-long trial, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. Damon Keller was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. 4. The families of Haley, Rachel, and Alina, justice had been served, but closure remained elusive. Questions lingered: how many others were there? Had Damon really acted alone? Were there more victims buried in places yet to be uncovered? Rockwood Falls would never be the same. A quiet town now carried a dark chapter in its history, a story of evil hidden behind a polite smile and a toolbox. Damon had believed he was clever enough, careful enough, invisible enough to get away with murder. He thought no one would find her. But in the end, the truth rose from the ground he buried. And it demanded to be heard.